What's up, everybody? Today we're going to change the screen on an iPhone 10. You can't just look at the screen and tell that it's cracked. The glass was fine, but the LCD had internal damage. I don't know if you noticed that little flicker right there. A customer bought this iPhone 10 from me and brought it back 3 hours later, claiming that they couldn't get it to charge. Once we opened it up and took a deeper look, there were some small cracks in the LCD itself, indicating some pressure damage. Might have sat on it, or something like that. I don't believe it was dropped, but something definitely damaged that LCD, and the LCD was cracked. So what we're going to do is start with the pin lobe screws down at the bottom. The pin lobe screws on the iPhone 10 and up models are a little longer than your traditional iPhone 8 Plus or older screws. And yeah, you do have to be extra careful with these newer screen assemblies, especially the OLED panels. They are ultra sensitive, so if you're looking to replace a cracked screen and you want to recycle the original, you got to be very careful how you get that screen off without doing further damage. I always put mine on a heat mat for about 5 minutes at 75 degrees Celsius to pretty much melt that glue underneath the screen without damaging the phone itself. Makes it so much easier to get off and get it off where you can recycle the screen. Once you do get that screen off, you've got 5 screws that you have to remove to undo the battery and remove the LCD connections. It folds open like a book, and then there's a metal plate that has 5 screws running along the side. Remove those 5 screws. They're all Y000 point screws. Once you get those screws out, get that plate off, your 3 connections pop open. One for the front camera assembly, Face ID, that type of stuff, and then 2 for the screen itself. And of course the battery connection needs to be done. You don't want to leave your battery connected while you're trying to do any work on this phone. You want to disconnect that battery first. Now the iPhone 10, to me, after I did the first 2 or 3 and got used to it, is by far the easiest iPhone to repair when it comes time to change the screen. You have so many fewer connections now that there's no home button on these iPhone 10s. You have to be very careful with Face ID, with your front camera assembly, with your ear speaker proximity sensor. Unlike previous models, you don't have to transfer the front camera assembly over, but you do have to transfer the ear speaker and the proximity sensor assembly over. And you don't want to damage that front camera, or excuse me, that proximity sensor and loudspeaker assembly when you change the screen, because if you put it back on as a third party part, your Face ID is no longer going to work. So you want to make sure you're extra careful with that. There are 3 screws holding down that proximity sensor and loudspeaker assembly. You remove those. There's a little bit of adhesive. You got to be very careful when removing that adhesive, and you want to fold that front camera assembly up and over. Now this particular one came off all as one piece. I didn't have to fold it over, but that's not always going to be the case. You just have to be very careful when removing this assembly, like I said before. And this entire assembly with cable will change over to your new screen, and that's it. That's all you have to transfer. I mean, past models you had to transfer the shields and the home button, the front camera assembly, and all that extra stuff. But this little piece right here is all you have to transfer to your new screen. So here we unbox the new screen. Pull the plastics off. I've opened phones up where previous technicians left plastics on. I always pull the plastics off. I don't think it's a good idea to have anything foreign inside of your phone that doesn't need to be there. I don't think it would cause any damage, but I'm not leaving anything foreign inside of my phone. No shield to transfer makes it so much easier. You can do this repair in 5 or 6 minutes. Now here you have to line up the proximity sensor, the microphone, and the ear speaker in their correct spaces. Very simple to do, but you got to be very careful. This is low risk, but like I said, if you damage this assembly, you're not going to have any Face ID left. So you put your 3 screws back in their proper place, and they're not exactly the same size, so be careful with where you place them. Get those screws put back into place. Now there's this little tiny metal clip on one of these screws. I believe it's the top right screw on this phone. And I don't know its function. I'm being honest. I don't know what it does, but you don't want to leave anything off that was on there originally. It's got to have a function. And it can get aggravating the first couple of times you do this repair. I've developed a little technique with my tweezers where I pick it up and I hold it in place while I screw it. And I make sure you look at its orientation before you disassemble the screen so that you know exactly how that little metal clip goes back on there. Once you're putting your screen back on, it's easier to reconnect the proximity sensor speaker assembly first, and then you're going to do your two screen connectors next. There's a dip down on the side of the second connection. It makes it a little bit tougher to get your finger down there, especially if you have big hands like I do. I usually use a spudger to try to get it pressed down once you have it lined up, but you got to be very careful not to bend those pins. This is an expensive phone to have to fix board pins on. And there you can see the screen works. Everything turned on. No lag on the screen. Everything works good. Face ID did still work when we were done. And now the customer didn't exactly admit that he broke the phone, but he didn't try to dispute it when I told him that the screen had been broken. He literally bought this phone and 3 hours later brought it back with a broken LCD. We knocked the repair out for him. He was happy. We got everything situated. Now, these 5 screws, there are 3 small screws and 2 longer screws. Make sure you do not put the long screws in the wrong holes. You got to make sure that your screws go back in the holes they were intended. You will fry your phone if you put the screws in the wrong place. I can't harp on that enough. I see people that take their phones apart because they watched one of these YouTube videos. Not necessarily mine, but anybody's YouTube video, and then they just throw their screws in a pile and try to put them back later and don't necessarily put them in the right place. You will mess your phone up if you put a screw in the wrong place that's longer than intended. You can catastrophically damage your board. Phone may not ever boot again. Long screw damage is real, and you don't want to mess your phone up by making a mistake that can be avoided. Another key point I'll make, those long pentalobe screws in the iPhone 10, 10R, 10S, and 10S Max, you got to make sure your pentalobe screwdriver bit is not worn down. You can easily strip those screws out, and if you strip those screws out, it's going to have a time taking your phone apart. That's the first line of defense, and you can't get that phone open if the screws are stripped and you can't get it back open. And there you have it. The iPhone 10 is done, ready to go. Customer picked their phone up. They were happy. Put your last 2 screws in there so that if you drop your phone and the screen doesn't just fall back open. And that's all there is to changing an iPhone 10 screen. Like I said, it's by far the easiest iPhone that I've repaired. And I've changed a lot of screens, but this one was fairly simple. Now these screens are a lot more expensive than your typical iPhone screen, because they're the first of the OLED generation for Apple. If you like these videos, please like them, share them, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so you can get notified when we post a new video. And thank you guys for watching.